Ethan Cole was used to knocks on his door. In the Willow Creek subdivision, the HOA had a habit of sending representatives at the oddest times, checking lawn height, paint color, or whether a trash bin had lingered by the curb too long. But this knock was different. It came late. Too late. He had been halfway through his bourbon, the flickering light of the television dancing shadows across the walls of his living room, when 3 sharp raps echoed from the front porch. Knock, knock, knock. Not impatient. Not casual, just deliberate. Ethan muted the TV, staring at the door. His dog, Max, a black Labrador mix, lifted his head from the rug and growled low in his throat. "Easy, boy," Ethan whispered, setting the glass down. Probably just the HOA idiots again. But the HOA never came after dark. That thought lingered like a bad smell as he rose and approached the door. Through the peephole, he saw 2 figures standing on the porch. Both wore identical dark jackets, clipboards in hand, their posture stiff and unnatural. Inspectors. He sighed, pulling the door open. "You guys don't exactly keep business hours, do you?" The taller one, a man with pale skin and slicked-back hair, gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Cole, routine inspection. Just a few compliance checks." "At 10 at night?" Ethan asked, suspicion edging into his voice. The second figure, a woman with angular features and unnervingly sharp eyes, tilted her head. "It's urgent." Max growled louder now, his hackles rising. Ethan shifted uneasily. "Look, if this is about my fence needing repainting, it can wait until morning." The woman's eyes didn't blink. "It can't wait." For a moment, Ethan thought of shutting the door in their faces. Something about the way they stood, too still, like mannequins, made his skin crawl. But the man produced a laminated badge and held it up, the letters HOA Compliance Division flashing under the porch light. "Fine," Ethan muttered. "But make it quick." They stepped inside. And immediately, the house felt wrong. The inspectors didn't move like normal people. They glided through the entryway, their clipboards clasped tightly, eyes darting not to the walls or furniture but to the corners, the ceiling, the shadows. The man's voice was calm. Too calm. "This property, it's older than the others on this block, yes?" "Yeah," Ethan said cautiously. "One of the original builds. Why?" The woman scribbled something on her clipboard, though her pen didn't seem to move. Max barked once, deep and loud, then retreated into the kitchen with his tail tucked. Ethan frowned. "Max never backed down from strangers, so what's the problem?" Ethan asked, folding his arms. Neither inspector answered. They had stopped in the middle of the living room, staring at the wall where Ethan's grandfather clock ticked steadily. The woman whispered something, too soft for Ethan to catch. The man nodded, then turned to Ethan with that same eerie smile. "Basement access," he said. "Now," Ethan blinked. "Excuse me?" "Your basement," the woman repeated, her voice sharp, commanding. "We need to see it." Ethan's mouth went dry. The basement was nothing special, just old storage, boxes of junk and tools. But no one in this neighborhood cared about basements. Why would the HOA? He forced a laugh. "Is this some kind of joke? You can check my lawn, my fence, hell, even the mailbox. But the basement? Not happening." The woman's stare hardened. "It's required." The man's voice dropped to a near hiss. "Show us the door." Ethan stepped back. Something was very wrong. "You know what? I think it's time you both leave." That was when Max started barking furiously from the kitchen, claws scraping against the tile as if he was trying to dig his way out. The inspectors didn't flinch. Instead, they moved in perfect unison. One step closer, clipboards lowering, their eyes now glinting with something that wasn't human. Ethan's heartbeat thundered in his chest. "Mr. Cole," the man said, his voice suddenly distorted, layered, as though 2 people spoke at once. "The basement, now." For a split second, Ethan considered running. But something in the man's voice froze him in place. Against his will, he found himself turning toward the hallway. His feet carried him toward the basement door, his hand trembling as it reached for the knob. "No," he whispered, trying to fight it. His muscles strained, his jaw clenched, but his fingers wrapped around the cold brass handle anyway. The inspector stood behind him, silent, waiting. Ethan swallowed hard and opened the door. The basement stairs yawned before him. Darkness stretching endlessly down, deeper than it should have been. He had been down there countless times, but tonight, the air that wafted up was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of rot. Max whimpered, refusing to come closer. The woman spoke softly now, almost soothing. "Go on." Ethan gripped the railing. His mind screamed to slam the door shut, to run, to do anything but obey. Yet something unseen pressed against him, guiding him forward. 1 step, 2 steps. The wooden stairs creaked under his weight. Behind him, the inspectors followed. Their footsteps were utterly silent. Halfway down, the light bulb flickered, and then he heard it, from the depths of the basement. A whisper, faint, curling through the air like smoke. Ethan, his blood ran cold. That voice wasn't one of the inspectors. It wasn't his imagination either. It was real! He froze, gripping the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. The inspectors stood motionless behind him, their faces expressionless. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Ethan, we're waiting!" The bulb above them sputtered once more and went out, plunging them into complete darkness. And in that darkness, something moved. The darkness pressed against Ethan like a living thing. He stood frozen on the stairs, the inspectors behind him, the whisper still lingering in his ears. His pulse pounded, each heartbeat echoing louder than the creaking of the old wooden steps. "Ethan," the voice came again, curling up from the basement like icy fog. This time it was layered, overlapping, multiple voices speaking in unison. Some deep, some high-pitched, all distorted as if underwater. Max barked furiously upstairs, the sound muffled, frantic, then abruptly cut off as if something had silenced him. Ethan's breath hitched. "Max?" The inspectors didn't respond. They hadn't moved, hadn't even breathed. Their presence was oppressive, their silhouettes faint against the weak moonlight filtering through the open door at the top of the stairs. The man spoke finally, his tone flat. "Keep going." Ethan turned his head, his eyes straining to pierce the dark. "What the hell is down there?" The woman's voice was sharp, commanding. "Keep going." His hand trembled against the railing. "You people are insane. This isn't an inspection. What are you really doing here?" The man's smile returned, faintly glowing in the dark, teeth too white, too sharp. "You'll see." The air grew colder with each step downward. Ethan's breath came out in pale mist, though it was still summer outside. His skin prickled as if unseen eyes crawled over him. At the bottom, the cement floor stretched out, though the room felt altered. The shelves where he kept boxes of old tools and Christmas decorations seemed further away, swallowed by the shadows. The space looked larger than it had ever been, as if the basement had stretched in the dark. And then, movement. Something slithered across the far wall, tall and thin, humanoid but grotesquely elongated. Ethan blinked hard, but it melted back into the shadows. He stumbled back, heart hammering. What was that?" The inspectors stepped off the last stair in perfect unison. They didn't answer. Instead, they walked toward the far corner of the basement, clipboards still in hand, eyes unblinking. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to run. He spun, bolting for the stairs, but the door at the top slammed shut on its own. The sound was deafening, a gunshot crack echoing through the concrete chamber. Ethan froze mid-step, staring upward in disbelief. The only light left came from a faint glow bleeding through the cracks of the doorframe. The woman turned her head toward him, her neck twisting too far, too smoothly. "There's no leaving. Not until it's finished." Ethan pressed his back against the stair railing, panic flooding his chest. "What's finished?" "What the hell do you people want from me?" The man lifted his clipboard. The pages fluttered as if blown by wind, though the basement air was deathly still. On the paper, dark shapes writhed and shifted, not words but moving symbols that pulsed faintly with light. "This house," the man said softly, "was built on an opening." The woman's eyes gleamed in the dark. "And the opening is hungry." The whispers returned, louder this time, echoing from every wall, every corner of the basement. Ethan clapped his hands over his ears, but the voices weren't outside. They were inside. "Let us in. Let us out. Feed us, Ethan." His stomach churned. He gagged, collapsing to his knees, bile rising in his throat. The cement beneath his hands felt damp, but when he looked down, he saw it wasn't water. It was blood. Dark, fresh, pooling between the cracks of the floor. He scrambled back, his hands smeared with red. "Oh God, what is this?" "What's happening?" The woman crouched near the spreading pool, dipping her fingers into it, then licking them clean. Her tongue was too long, snake-like, curling unnaturally as she smiled at him. "It begins." The man turned his head sharply toward the shadows, his face contorting, jaw opening wider than humanly possible. From his throat came not words, but a guttural growl that shook the walls. The shelves toppled, boxes crashing down, spilling rusted tools and broken furniture across the floor. Something moved within the dark. Many things. Crawling, dragging limbs, whispering his name, "Ethan! Ethan! Ethan!" He stumbled backward until his shoulders slammed into the cold cement wall. His breath came in sharp gasps, the air thick with rot and iron. "You're out of your minds!" he spat, though his voice cracked. "I don't know what you're doing, but you need to leave." The woman snapped her head toward him, eyes burning with black fire. "Leave? No one leaves until the offering is made." "Offering?" The man gestured to the floor where the blood spread wider, faster, now bubbling as if boiling. Shapes twisted beneath the surface, hands pressing upward, clawing, straining to break through. "This house remembers," the man said. "It remembers every family before you. Every life is consumed. And now," he pointed directly at Ethan, "it wants yours." Ethan's fight-or-flight instinct kicked in. He pushed off the wall and sprinted for the stairs, taking them two at a time, pounding against the door at the top. "Help, somebody! Let me out!" But the door didn't budge. The knob twisted in his hands, but it was like turning stone. Behind him, the whispers rose into a cacophony of shrieks and laughter. The inspectors no longer moved like people. They convulsed, their limbs bending backward, their bodies stretching unnaturally as shadows poured from their mouths. The woman's distorted voice thundered in his skull. "You can't run. You were chosen the moment you moved in." The blood at the basement's center erupted, spraying upward. From it emerged something tall, skeletal, with jagged claws and hollow eyes that burned faintly red. Its mouth opened wide, unhinging, releasing a scream that wasn't sound but pure force, rattling Ethan's bones. He collapsed against the door, his chest heaving, his ears ringing, and then the door creaked. Just a sliver. A gap of light spilled onto him from above. Warm, almost safe. He shoved his shoulder into it. Desperate. The inspectors howled, their voices layered, furious. No escape! The skeletal creature lunged forward, claws outstretched, and Ethan hurled himself through the door, slamming it shut behind him. He collapsed onto his hallway floor, gasping, trembling. The house above looked normal again, silent. No blood, no shadows, no monstrous inspectors, but the basement door shuddered once, twice. From behind it, whispers seeped through the cracks. "You can't keep us locked away forever." Ethan scrambled back, his entire body shaking, staring at the door. Max crawled out from under the kitchen table, whining, his tail between his legs. The house was quiet. Too quiet. But Ethan knew one thing now. Whatever those inspectors had been, they weren't human, and the basement wasn't just a basement. It was a prison, and something inside wanted out. The morning sun should have brought relief. It didn't. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, staring blankly at the basement door. Every creak of the old wood seemed amplified, as though something down there was breathing, waiting. Max lay under the table, ears twitching, his once cheerful dog now silent, eyes darting nervously toward the same door. Ethan hadn't slept. He hadn't dared. The whispers had faded in the night, but the silence that followed felt worse. Like predators crouching in tall grass, waiting for the right moment. He told himself it was a nightmare, stress, hallucination. But his hands still bore faint stains, dried rust red beneath his fingernails. The smell of iron clung to him no matter how much he scrubbed. And there was something else, his phone. He'd tried calling the HOA office around 3 in the morning, desperate for answers. The line connected, but what he heard wasn't a person. It was the same whispering chorus, hissing his name until he threw the phone across the room. Now, in the daylight, part of him wanted to call again, to demand an explanation. But another part, the stronger part, knew better. This wasn't something the HOA could explain. This was something the house itself was keeping from him. By noon, Ethan had made a decision. He needed answers. Not from the inspectors, not from neighbors who smiled too wide and asked too few questions. He needed history. The local library wasn't far, an old brick building at the edge of town. He hadn't been there since moving in, but now it felt like the only place that could help. He shoved on a jacket, clipped Max's leash, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, unnaturally still. As they walked down the street, he noticed something he hadn't before. Every house looked perfect. Too perfect. Lawns trimmed to exact lengths, flowers arranged in eerily symmetrical patterns. Not a single curtain out of place. Not a single child's toy was left in the yard. And the neighbors. They were watching. Men watering lawns that didn't need watering. Women chatting on porches with identical smiles. Eyes followed him and Max as they walked by. "Morning, Ethan," one of them called cheerfully. "Heading out?" Ethan forced a tight smile. "Yeah, just errands." The man nodded, but his eyes didn't. They were cold, measuring. Ethan quickened his pace. The library smelled of dust and paper, a comforting change from the oppressive sterility of his neighborhood. The librarian, an elderly woman with half-moon glasses, barely looked up as he approached the counter. "I'm looking for records on my property," he said, his voice low. "Construction history, old ownership, anything like that." Her eyes flicked up at him then, sharp behind the glasses. "Address?" He gave it. Something changed in her face, subtle, but there. A tightness around the mouth. A pause too long before she scribbled it down. "You'll want the archives in the basement," she said softly. "But be careful down there." He frowned. "Why?" She didn't answer. The library's basement was cool and dimly lit, the air damp with age. Rows of metal filing cabinets stretched along the walls, interspersed with wooden shelves sagging under the weight of forgotten town records. Ethan spent an hour digging, pulling yellowed files and brittle newspapers. Most of it was mundane: zoning laws, renovation permits, neighborhood newsletters. Then he found it, a newspaper clipping, dated 1952. "Tragedy strikes new housing development. Family of 4 found dead in basement." His stomach dropped. The article described the Anders family, the original owners of his house. They'd been discovered after neighbors complained of a smell. Authorities ruled it a murder-suicide, though the details were vague. The father had supposedly lost his mind, killing his wife and 2 children before taking his own life. Ethan swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he read. But there was more. A handwritten note paper-clipped to the file. Not murder. Not suicide. They were fed to it. His heart skipped. He stared at the faded ink, the messy scrawl. No signature. He shoved the clipping into his jacket pocket, his pulse hammering. Digging deeper, he found more. Families that had lived in the house never stayed long. Sudden relocations. Tragic accidents, disappearances. Each time, the HOA records blandly noted, "House vacant. New residents pending." And then another article, this one from 1978. "Inspectors go missing during routine check." The photo chilled him. 2 figures, blurred in old black and white, wearing the same style of uniforms the inspectors had worn in his house last night. They had never been found. Ethan shoved the papers back into the folder and slammed the drawer shut. The clang echoed through the basement louder than it should have. Too loud. The overhead lights flickered. Max whimpered, pressing against his leg, and then from between the shelves came a sound that froze him in place. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Ethan turned, his throat dry. Nobody was there. Just rows of filing cabinets and shadows that stretched too far. "Hello?" he called, voice breaking. Silence. Then, faintly, whispering, "Ethan." He bolted, racing up the stairs two at a time. Max scrambling behind him, he burst into the daylight of the library's main floor. The librarian glanced up, her face unreadable. "Find what you needed?" she asked. Ethan shoved the clipping deeper into his pocket. "Yeah, more than I wanted." Her gaze lingered on him. "Be careful. That house doesn't forget." The drive home was a blur. His hands gripped the wheel too tightly, his mind racing with the fragments he'd uncovered. Families dead, inspectors missing. The house was built on an opening, and that note, they were fed to it. What was it? Back home, he parked in the driveway and sat for a long time, staring at the front door. The house loomed silently, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun. But it didn't look like glass anymore. It looked like eyes. Watching, Max whimpered softly from the passenger seat. "I know, boy," Ethan whispered. "I don't want to go back in either." But he had no choice. When he finally stepped inside, the house greeted him with silence. The basement door was just where he'd left it, closed, still, too still. Ethan leaned against the wall, clutching the newspaper clipping in his pocket, his jaw tight. "The house remembers," he muttered. "But so do I." And for the first time, a grim thought crossed his mind. If the house wanted him, if the inspectors wanted him, then maybe the only way to survive was to stop being prey. Maybe it was time to fight back. Night fell heavily over the neighborhood. The street, so manicured and perfect in the daylight, became something else when the sun sank. Too quiet, too orderly. It was the silence of a place staged for a photograph, with no living thing behind the image. Ethan had been staring out his window for nearly an hour, watching. Every porch light clicked on at the same time, 9:01 p.m. sharp. Every curtain closed in unison, as if following a script, except for his house, his home, with its lights flickering despite new bulbs. His home, where shadows crawled across walls with no source. His home, where the basement door felt like it was breathing. Ethan sat on the couch with Max at his feet. His hands trembled as he unfolded the newspaper clipping again. The faded ink glared at him. Not murder, not suicide. "They were fed to it. What are you?" he whispered to the empty air. The air didn't answer. But the walls creaked, Max's ears perked. He growled, low and dangerous. His gaze locked on the basement door. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Not again." The knock came, knock, knock, knock. 3 deliberate pounds, just like in the library basement. The sound reverberated up through the floor, making the mugs in the kitchen cabinet rattle. Max barked, lunging toward the door, but Ethan grabbed his collar. "Stay, boy." His voice shook. The knocking stopped. For a moment, silence, and then, "Inspection time." The voice was low, distorted, as though a radio was playing somewhere beneath the house. Ethan's stomach flipped. He rose slowly, eyes locked on the basement door. "You're not real," he muttered, more to himself than to the voice. "You died in 1978. I saw the article." The air seemed to shiver, and then the door handle turned. Ethan stumbled back, heart hammering. The knob twisted slowly, deliberately, though the door remained closed. Max snarled, and then the door swung open. Darkness yawned below, thicker than night. A foul stench rolled out, metallic and sweet, like rotting meat mixed with rusted iron. From the darkness, 2 figures emerged, the inspectors. They wore the same crisp uniforms as before, but now they were wrong. Their skin was too pale, too stretched. Their eyes glowed faintly, milky white like drowned corpses. Their smiles were carved too wide, teeth jagged and glistening. "Evening, Mr. Carter," one of them said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "Routine follow-up." Ethan backed toward the living room, his fists clenched. "Stay away from me." The other inspector chuckled, a wet rattling sound. "Oh, we can't do that." "Not until the house is satisfied," Max barked furiously, lunging forward, but the inspector raised a hand. The dog froze mid-stride, whimpering, as though invisible hands pinned him to the ground. "Leave him alone!" Ethan roared. The taller inspector tilted his head. "We don't want him." "We want you." Ethan's chest heaved. Why? What the hell does this house want? The inspector's grin widened, his jaw unhinging slightly too far. It wants what it's always wanted. A keeper, a feeder. Someone to bring it meat. Ethan's stomach churned. You think I'm going to help you? After what you did? The shorter inspector stepped closer, his pale eyes boring into Ethan's. You misunderstand. You don't have a choice. You live here now. And this house, it eats. Either you feed it, or it feeds on you. Ethan stumbled backward, his hand brushing the heavy lamp on the end table. He grabbed it, lifting it like a weapon. Get out, now! The inspectors looked at each other, then laughed, a horrible guttural sound that rattled the walls. You can't chase us out, one said. We are the house. The lights flickered violently, plunging the room in and out of shadow. For an instant, Ethan saw their faces peel away, revealing writhing, fleshless skulls beneath. The air grew thick, pressing against his lungs. Desperate, Ethan swung the lamp. It smashed against the taller inspector's head, sending shards of porcelain flying. For a heartbeat, the figure staggered. Its face cracked open like porcelain, revealing a black, writhing void beneath. It hissed, lunging at him. Ethan grabbed Max's leash and yanked the dog free, sprinting toward the stairs. Come on, boy! They bolted up to the second floor as the inspector's footsteps pounded after them. Slow, deliberate, but impossibly loud. Like hammers striking the floorboards, Ethan slammed his bedroom door and shoved a dresser against it. His chest heaved, every muscle trembling with adrenaline. The footsteps stopped. Silence. He pressed his ear to the door, straining to hear nothing. Then, right beside his ear, a whisper seeped through the wood. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan stumbled back, his heart in his throat. The whisper came again, overlapping, multiplying. 2 voices, then 4, then dozens, all whispering his name. All promised the same thing. Feed us. He grabbed the newspaper clipping from his pocket and stared at the words again. They were fed to it. The inspectors weren't the danger. The house itself was alive, and it was hungry. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, the whispers started up again. Low, raspy voices speaking from the walls, the vents, the pipes. They didn't sound angry. They sounded patient. Feed us, just one. Feed us and we'll let you breathe. He paced the room, fists clenched, the dresser still barricading the door. Max lay trembling beneath the bed, ears flattened, eyes fixed on the corner as if watching something Ethan couldn't see. The inspectors hadn't come back, not physically anyway, but their presence lingered like a stain in the air. When dawn finally crept through the blinds, Ethan shoved the dresser aside and opened the door. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Normal sounds. But the walls still seemed to breathe. He needed answers. By noon, Ethan sat hunched over his laptop at the dining room table, surrounded by stacks of printouts. He had searched everything: paranormal architecture, cursed land, haunted neighborhoods. The deeper he dug, the stranger the picture became. This development wasn't just some suburban project from the 70s. It had been designed by a man named Charles Harker, an architect who vanished before construction was finished. His last project before disappearing, Ethan's house. Local legends whispered that Harker had been obsessed with living structures, that he'd studied ancient burial mounds, occult symbols, even ritual sacrifice. His journals, according to one conspiracy site, described buildings not as shelters, but as vessels. A house may be taught to hunger. Ethan rubbed his eyes, his head pounding. It was insane, and yet it matched everything he'd seen. Scrolling further, he stumbled onto a thread in an abandoned forum. The posts were nearly 20 years old. Anonymous users are trading rumors about the neighborhood. One caught his attention. User Ghost Hand 77. Don't go near Lot 9. The inspectors aren't real people. They're part of it. The house eats. My cousin disappeared there. If you move in, you can't move out. You belong to it. Ethan's stomach dropped. Lot 9. That was his address. His phone buzzed. He jumped, nearly knocking over the coffee mug beside him. A new text lit the screen. Unknown number. Inspection scheduled for tonight. Be ready. Ethan's throat went dry. His fingers shook as he typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. Instead, the basement door creaked open on its own. By evening, Ethan was a wreck. He'd locked every door, nailed shut the basement, and even packed a suitcase. Max stayed close at his heels, refusing to leave his side. "I'm not staying here," Ethan muttered, hauling the suitcase down the stairs. "They can keep the damn house. I'm gone." But when he opened the front door, the street outside wasn't there. Instead of manicured lawns and perfect driveways, there was only blackness. An endless void stretched out beyond his porch, swallowing everything. The street lamps hung like dead stars above an abyss. Ethan staggered back, slamming the door shut. His pulse thundered. He ran to the back door. The same, nothing but a void. Every window showed the same sight. His house was no longer in the neighborhood. It was floating in nothing. No. He dropped to his knees, clutching his hair. The inspector's laughter echoed through the vents. "You belong here now, Mr. Carter," one of them whispered. "The house has chosen you," Max barked furiously, snapping at the air. But even his growls sounded muffled, swallowed by the oppressive silence pressing in from outside. The lights flickered again, plunging the house into alternating darkness and sickly yellow glow. And with every flicker, Ethan saw something moving in the corner of his eye, shapes stretching long and skeletal, crawling across the ceiling, bending in impossible angles. The house wasn't just alive. It was closing in, desperate. Ethan grabbed the printouts of Harker's journals. One passage burned into his mind: "A vessel that eats must have a keeper. If the keeper refuses, the house consumes him. The only escape is to pass the hunger on to another." Ethan froze. Pass the hunger. The meaning sank in like a blade in his gut. The only way out was to lure someone else inside, to let the house claim a new feeder. His phone buzzed again. Another text. "Inspection in 1 hour. We will collect." He dropped the phone, bile rising in his throat. His hands trembled. His choices were gone. Stay and be devoured, or feed the house. Max whimpered beside him, pressing against his leg. Ethan looked down at the dog. His jaw clenched. "Not you, buddy. Never you." But the house was still hungry, and the inspectors were coming. The knock came exactly at midnight. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan froze in the living room, suitcase abandoned at his side, Max growling low. The sound wasn't just wood against wood. It reverberated through the walls, through his ribs, through the marrow of his bones. Knock, knock, knock. He didn't want to open the door. He already knew what was waiting. But the house had other plans. The locks clicked by themselves. The knob turned. The door swung open. 3 figures stood there, tall, pale, dressed in the same cheap inspector uniforms as before. Clipboards in hand, name badges reflecting the weak porch light. Only their faces had stretched grotesquely since the last time. Their skin sagged, eyes glowing faintly yellow, jaws working as though chewing invisible meat. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," one said, his voice slick and wet. "We are here for the scheduled collection." Ethan's mouth went dry. I didn't agree to anything." The second inspector tilted her head, the neck bending too far, a rubbery crack echoing.
"You moved in?"
"Agreement was sealed." The third inspector sniffed the air, his tongue flicking out like a snake. "But the house still hungers." "Payment must be made," Max barked, teeth bared. Ethan backed away, clutching one of Harker's printouts like it was a shield. "What do you want? Money? Fine, take it. I'll drain my account, every penny." The inspector's laughter rattled through the house, filling every vent. "Not money, Mr. Carter." The first one leaned forward, grinning too wide. "A house eats. A house needs. You must feed it." Ethan felt his stomach knot. He remembered the passage. "The only escape is to pass the hunger on to another. Feed it what?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The inspector's grin widened. "Someone living. Someone warm. Someone who trusts you enough to enter." Ethan's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the couch to steady himself. No, I won't do it." The inspectors clicked their tongues in unison. "Refusal has a cost." The lights went out. Ethan groped for his phone, using its glow to see. The inspectors were gone. The doorway yawned open into nothing but the void again, blackness stretching forever. Then he heard it, the walls moaning, the house itself shifting. The ceiling sagged like wet fabric. The carpet writhed under his feet. Max yelped, his paws sinking an inch into the rug as if it were quicksand. Ethan pulled him free, heart slamming. The voice of the inspectors whispered all around. 1 week, Mr. Carter. 1 week to feed us, or the house will feed itself. The moaning stopped. The lights flickered back on. The door slammed shut, and they were gone. Ethan spent the rest of the night sitting in the living room, trembling, Max curled against his side. His mind wouldn't stop spinning. He thought about the neighbors, their cheerful waves, their perfect lawns, their Stepford smiles. He thought about the old woman down the street who'd brought him a welcome basket, the kids riding bikes, the man who jogged past every morning. Any of them would step inside if he asked. All it would take was a smile. A lie, and they'd never leave. The thought made him sick. He vomited in the sink, clutching the counter until his knuckles turned white. "No, I can't do it," he muttered. "I can't." But in the silence, he swore he heard the house chuckle. Over the next few days, things only got worse. Every meal he tried to eat turned rancid in his mouth. Water tasted like rust. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time his eyes closed, the whispers started. "Feed us, feed us, feed us." Max grew thinner, weaker. His food spoiled instantly. The house wasn't letting them nourish themselves. By Friday, Ethan's reflection in the mirror was gaunt, his eyes sunken. He barely recognized himself. And that night, as he sat shivering on the couch, his phone buzzed again. A new text. 3 days left. Choose wisely. He dropped the phone, his hands shaking violently, because this time the text wasn't from an unknown number. It was from his neighbor, Todd, the one who jogged past every morning. By Saturday, the neighborhood didn't feel like a neighborhood anymore. It felt like a trap. Ethan walked Max slowly along the cul-de-sac, his body weak, his head pounding from hunger. Every porch he passed seemed to lean toward him, watching. Every cheerful wave from a neighbor carried a different meaning now. Would they come if I invited them in? Would they trust me enough to cross the threshold? The thought disgusted him. But it also tempted him. When he got back, he found the door unlocked. He swore he'd bolted it. On the kitchen counter sat a stack of old Polaroids he didn't recognize. He picked one up with trembling fingers. It was his living room. But not his living room. The wallpaper was a different color, the furniture outdated. A family sat on the couch, parents and 2 kids smiling stiffly. On the back of the photo was scrawled, "They lived here." "They fed us," his stomach lurched. He flipped through more photos. Families from decades past, their eyes hollow, their smiles wrong. Some looked frozen in fear, others like they had surrendered. At the bottom of the pile was one final Polaroid. It was his own face. Taken from the doorway while he slept on the couch. On the back, "Your turn." That night, the whispers grew louder. "Invite Todd. He likes beer." "Tell him to come watch the game." "What about the old woman?" "She trusts you. She would come." The house must eat. Ethan stuffed his ears with tissues, but the voices leaked through the walls, the vents, the pipes. Max whimpered, pawing at the door, desperate to escape. Ethan hugged him tightly. "I'm not doing it." "I'm not." His voice cracked. "I won't feed you anyone." The house groaned, the floorboards twisting beneath his feet, making him stumble. Sunday morning, there was a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. His heart stopped. But when he opened it, it was just Todd, the jogging neighbor. "Hey, man," Todd said cheerfully, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Haven't seen you outside much lately." "Everything okay?" Ethan swallowed hard, his mouth bone dry. He could see it, how easy it would be. Invite him in, offer him water. Todd would cross the threshold smiling, unaware. The whispers coiled around him like snakes. Now, now, now. For a second, Ethan almost said it. "Come inside," but Max growled. Snapping him out of it, Ethan forced a smile, every muscle in his face aching. "I'm fine, just..." Busy. Todd gave him a curious look, then shrugged. All right, man. Just checking in. See you around. As Todd jogged off, Ethan slammed the door, gasping like he'd just run a marathon. He had resisted. Barely, but how much longer could he keep resisting? That night, he dreamed of the inspectors. They stood in a circle around him, clipboards in hand, their pale faces glowing faintly in the dark. Time runs short. Mr. Carter, one said. Another leaned close, her voice a hiss. Sacrifice one? Or lose all? Then he saw it, visions flashing like lightning. Himself, gaunt and skeletal, Max lifeless at his feet. The house swallowing him whole, his screams muffled by the walls. And then another vision. Todd, stepping through the doorway, his face twisting in horror as the floor opened beneath him. Ethan standing there, alive, fed, free. He woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. The phone buzzed. A new message. Tomorrow night. Final chance. His hands shook as he read it. Because this time, the message wasn't from Todd's number. It was from his wife's old phone, a phone that had been buried with her 2 years ago. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Not after seeing the message. The glowing screen of his phone lay on the coffee table, the words staring back at him like a curse. Tomorrow night. Final chance. And beneath it, the contact name was one he hadn't seen in 2 years. Anna, his wife, dead and buried, yet somehow her voice, her digital ghost, had found him. By morning, the house had grown hostile. The lights flickered when he moved too slowly. The walls creaked whenever he tried to ignore the whispers. The fridge door slammed shut by itself when he reached for food, punishing him for refusing to feed it properly. Max wouldn't stop barking at the basement door. His hackles were raised, his teeth bared at something Ethan couldn't see. When Ethan finally opened the door, hoping to calm the dog, the smell of rot hit him like a wave. The basement had always been damp and moldy, but now the stench was unbearable. On the bottom step lay something new. A box. Inside were bones. Human bones. Arranged neatly like a grotesque offering, and tucked between the ribs, a piece of paper. We waited. They resisted. They failed. You won't. The day dragged like a funeral march. Ethan barely ate. Barely moved. He thought of Anna. The night she died in that car accident. The guilt he still carried for arguing with her that morning, for not saying I love you before she left. Now the house was using her. Using her memory. Using her voice. That night, his phone buzzed again, a new message. From Anna's number. I forgive you. Let me in. Ethan's blood froze. His hand shook so badly he nearly dropped the phone. And then, knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the house, rattling the glassware in the cabinets. He staggered to the door. His breath caught in his throat, because standing on the porch wasn't Todd. It wasn't the old woman down the street. It was Anna, her hair damp from the rain. Her clothes just as he remembered them that morning she left for work. Her smile was warm, familiar. Ethan, she whispered, let me in. Please, I'm so cold. He pressed his hand to the doorframe to keep from collapsing. This couldn't be real. She was dead. He had seen the casket lowered into the earth, but her eyes, God, her eyes looked real. Anna? She nodded gently. The house said you were lonely. It said I could come back. But only if you let me in. The whispers surged all around him, excited, insistent. Yes, let her in. It's all you want. She belongs here. She's waiting for you. Max barked and barked, his growls savage, his body pressed between Ethan and the door as though to block the way. Ethan's hands trembled on the knob. He could feel the choice solidifying inside him. If he opened it, if he let her in, would it really be Anna? Or just another mouth for the house? He screamed and slammed the door shut. Anna's face twisted instantly, her warm smile cracking into something jagged, her skin paling to corpse gray, her eyes glowing hollow white. From outside came a guttural screech that didn't sound human. The door rattled as something clawed at it. Let me in! Ethan backed away, clutching Max, his ears ringing with the sound. And then silence. When he opened his eyes, the porch was empty. No Anna, just the dark street, but his phone buzzed one last time. Final night. Fail and you will join us. Ethan hadn't slept in 48 hours. His house no longer felt like wood and stone. It was breathing. The walls pulsed like lungs. The floors groaned like bones under skin. The windows rattled, whispering his name whenever the wind passed, and the ultimatum burned in his head. Final night. Fail, and you will join us. He sat in the living room with Max curled at his feet, gripping a kitchen knife with blistered fingers. The TV switched itself on and off. Static, then flickers of images. His wife's face. The inspector's blank stares. That smile from Todd across the street, stretched wider than human lips should allow. Ethan muted it, but the whispers didn't stop. Then, knock, knock, knock. The sound rattled through the house like a death toll. Max snarled, his fur bristling. Ethan staggered to the front door, every nerve in his body screaming not to touch it. He peeked through the peephole, and there they were, the inspectors. The same men in cheap uniforms and HOA badges, except their faces were wrong. Their skin sagged like wet paper. Their eyes glowed faintly, white and hollow. They weren't alive. Not anymore. "Mr. Keller," one croaked, his voice like water down a drain. "Inspection due. You've delayed long enough." Ethan backed away. "You're dead. I saw you vanish. You never left my house." The other inspector tilted his head. "Yes, we stayed. We're part of it now. And soon, you will be too." The door handle turned. The lock clicked even though Ethan hadn't touched it. The door swung open on its own. The inspectors stepped inside, moving stiffly, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings. The air dropped 20 degrees. Max barked furiously, leaping at one of them, only to be swatted aside with an unnatural strength. "Max!" Ethan cried, rushing to his dog, but the inspectors blocked his path. "You can't fight it!" one hissed. His skin split at the mouth as he spoke, revealing black teeth that weren't teeth at all, but jagged fragments of bone. "The house has chosen you. You resist, but every choice you make feeds it." They advanced. Ethan brandished the knife, slashing wildly. The blade cut across the first inspector's arm. No blood spilled, just black smoke hissing from the wound. The creature only smiled. "Hurt me, hurt yourself." And as Ethan blinked, he felt the same burning slice open across his own arm, as though the knife had cut him instead. He dropped the blade, clutching his wound in horror. The inspectors circled him. "Final night," one whispered. "Join or be consumed." The house joined the assault. The lights flickered violently. The floorboards buckled. Cabinet doors banged open and shut. A deep groan echoed from the basement like something massive waking up. Ethan staggered back, trapped. The inspector's pale hands reached for him, their fingers lengthening into claws. He shoved past them and ran. Not upstairs, not outside. His instincts dragged him toward the one place he had always avoided. The basement. The smell of rot hit him as he descended, Max limping behind. The inspectors followed, their footsteps slow and deliberate, like they knew he couldn't escape. At the bottom of the stairs, Ethan froze, because the basement wasn't a basement anymore. The walls had split open, forming a cavern of pulsing black stone. Strange markings glowed faintly across the surface, etched into the rock like living veins. The bones he had seen before were gone, replaced with rows of empty chairs facing the center, as if waiting for a meeting to begin. And in the middle stood a long table. An HOA meeting table. But the seats were filled with corpses, rotting, eyeless neighbors. The old woman from next door, Todd, even the inspector's real bodies slumped in place, all of them grinning with hollow jaws, and at the head of the table a figure rose, Anna, but not his wife anymore. Her face was pale, stretched too tight, her eyes pits of glowing white. Her voice echoed as though a dozen throats spoke at once. "Welcome, Ethan. We saved you a seat." The inspectors stood on either side of him now, their hands on his shoulders, pressing him forward. The whispers screamed all around him. He wasn't in a house anymore. He was in a temple built for the HOA of the dead. The basement pulsed like a heart. Ethan's ears rang as the voices swirled around him, a cacophony of whispers layered over one another. Max whined at his side, tail tucked between his legs, but refused to leave him. Anna, or the thing wearing Anna's skin, stood at the head of the grotesque meeting table. The hollow corpses sat in their chairs, their heads turning in unison to face him. "Sit, Ethan," Anna said, her voice warping between human and something else entirely. "Your inspection is overdue." The inspector shoved him toward the table. The chair waiting for him was carved from bone, its back etched with the same glowing markings as the walls. "I'm not one of you," Ethan shouted, jerking away. His voice cracked with desperation. "You can't make me." Anna's smile was wide, too wide. "You've already signed the covenant. Every act of resistance, every night survived, bound you tighter. You think you fought us? No, you prepared yourself for membership." The corpses clapped their decayed hands, a slow, mocking applause. The sound echoed in Ethan's skull like nails on glass. Ethan's knees buckled. The inspectors held him in place, their claws digging into his shoulders. He tried to scream, but his throat tightened as though invisible hands were choking him. "You joined when you opened the door," Anna whispered, stepping closer. Her face shimmered, flickering between the woman he loved and the ghastly mask she had become. "You welcomed us into your home. And a home is forever." The basement shook violently. Cracks split open across the floor, revealing endless black beneath, as though the entire house floated above a void. From the fissures, hands reached upward, skeletal, grasping, pulling at his ankles. Max barked furiously, snapping at the hands, tearing bone to splinters. The dog leapt between Ethan and the inspectors, snarling with a ferocity Ethan had never seen before. The inspectors recoiled slightly, as if the dog's pure loyalty burned them. Ethan seized the moment. He wrenched free, staggering toward the table. His eyes locked on an object resting in front of Anna, a gavel. It wasn't wood. It was carved from a human skull. Something in him knew. That gavel was the key. The symbol of authority, the heart of this grotesque HOA ritual. Anna lunged forward. "Don't!" But Ethan grabbed it. The room screamed. Literally screamed. The walls convulsed. The corpses wailed. The inspectors shrieked like breaking glass. The gavel pulsed in his hand, hot as a branding iron, burning into his palm. Ethan raised it high, heart pounding, and slammed it down onto the table. The sound wasn't a knock. It was an explosion. The entire cavern shuddered. The corpses crumbled to dust. The inspectors' bodies convulsed, their hollow forms collapsing into smoke. Anna shrieked, her voice splitting the air. "You fool! Without us, the covenant cannot hold. The house will fall." The void beneath them widened. The basement floor crumbled away piece by piece. Ethan clutched Max to his chest and ran. Up the stairs, through the warping hallway, the house tearing itself apart around him. Doorways stretched and snapped, walls bled black liquid, portraits screamed as he passed. "You can't leave, Ethan!" Anna's voice thundered. He glanced back. She was crawling after him. Her body elongating, arms stretching down the hallway, her face a mask of hatred and despair. He kicked open the front door. Cold air hit him like salvation. He stumbled onto the lawn, gasping. Max clutched against him. Behind him, the house groaned like a dying beast. Windows shattered. The roof caved inward. Black smoke poured from every crack, and then silence. The entire house collapsed into the earth, vanishing as though it had never been there. In its place, a crater of blackened soil. The HOA street was empty, silent. No neighbors, no inspectors, no Todd, just Ethan and Max, standing alone under the pale dawn. Weeks later, Ethan sat in a motel room far from that neighborhood. His arm still bore the scar where he'd cut himself, but otherwise, he was alive. Max slept peacefully at his side. Ethan told himself it was over, that he'd destroyed them. But then, a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. His blood ran cold. A voice outside, calm and polite, spoke through the wood. "Mr. Keller, we're here for your overdue inspection."